My name is Fred Taylor. I'm originally from Mississippi. I lived in California for about 26 years. I think that's kind of where the really big climbing bug hit me. Did a lot of rock climbing and then transitioned into mountaineering, and the mountaineering kind of led to this kind of stuff. I do live in Mississippi now, and so I've climbed 3 international peaks, 3 of the 7 summits, training from Mississippi. So if you believe that, yeah, I get it. So yeah, I mean, there's Mississippi flat. It's way flatter than Kentucky. So you have hills, we don't. So it can be done. So again, and so I want to preface this before Reggie gets up here because I know he's going to say something about it afterwards. I don't know if you know what the title of this was, why I climbed Everest, and you shouldn't. That was not my idea, that was his idea. I would never discourage anybody from pursuing their dreams. So, I think the introduction's already been done. You don't need to, yeah, so anyway, I did climb Mount Everest in May of this year, so May of 25. Our summit day was the 23rd. I'm going to walk you through, and again, just like Reggie said earlier, please, I mean, I don't want to be like, I'm just showing you the stuff talking. If there's a point along the way where you're interested enough to stop me from what I'm doing, just say, hey, ask questions. I want this to be more interactive. I brought a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of show and tell, the kind of things that you might not necessarily see even at your brand new REI. You might not see some of this stuff. I worked at REI part-time for a while just for the gear. People don't like you to say that. And so we had to will call a minus 40-degree bag into our store because we all wanted to see what one would look like. And so it's possible that you wouldn't even be able to see that in your REI. So again, feel free. You guys can rummage through all that stuff. If you want to jump in that sleeping bag, trust me, you'll die 1,000 deaths in that. So let's just jump right into this. Again, if you have questions, please just feel free. I don't know how much stuff you need to know from my background. I'm 60, about to turn 61 years old, so a 60-year-old can climb Mount Everest, and a 60-year-old from Mississippi can climb Mount Everest. I asked just a minute ago that I don't think I'm the first Mississippian to summit. In fact, there was a guy on our group that was one of our climbers who was actually originally from Mississippi. We knew a lot of the same people. Strange, you got to go to the other side of the world to find somebody that you know and you have things in common with. So again, there's hope. If you're a little bit older, you still can pull this off. All right, we're going to jump right into this. So Mount Everest, the thing about Mount Everest is this. I don't know why it is, but Mount Everest is fascinating to people. I've climbed peaks around the world. I've even climbed in Antarctica, and I tell people that, and they'll go, that's cool. But if you tell them that you climbed Mount Everest, everything is different because people are fascinated with Mount Everest. For whatever reason. I don't know if it's because it's the highest point you can stand on the planet. I don't know, it's just there's so much mystery, there's so much lore, there's so much history surrounding it. It's kind of, we've been talking today about how everybody kind of uses part of our vernacular, like, well, that was my Mount Everest. Whatever your big struggle was, you always will just say, well, that was my Mount Everest. And so it's so ingrained into who we are, our culture, our vernacular, that it's somehow about it, it's just fascinating. So I want to kind of start with why do you think it's so fascinating? And for me as a climber, what makes it so fascinating, and it's hard to stand on the slopes of Mount Everest and not have this stuff creeping into your mind, is how much history there is on that mountain, how many really famous mountaineering expeditions and stories began and in some cases unfortunately ended there. So if you could transport yourself back to 1919 or so, but up into 1920, into that era right there. I mean, I don't know what the world was like there, but there was this push to explore everything. And so Nepal, the country of Nepal, was closed to foreigners all the way up to about 1950. So any expedition that came into Everest for survey purposes, Everest was one of the very popular and very famous British surveyors. That's what the peak was named after because he originally went there to survey to see, hey, that is the highest peak. There were stories that drew them in for that. They had to come in through Tibet, which is now occupied by China. So that made it very difficult, but the Nepal side, the route that we actually choose and that's most commonly climbed, wasn't even accessible to them. So imagine yourself in 1920, you know about Mount Everest, there's this push for all these countries to stick a flag on top of something and claim it for their country. So there was a huge push to do that. So the exploration mentality was totally different. It wasn't just like I'm trying to get my picture on the top to prove to everybody that I can do it. It was literally to claim it for their sovereign nation. So in 1920, early 1920s, there were several expeditions went to the peak. This is actually from 1924. This is a very famous group of people because several of these people, George Mallory, that's a name I'm sure that some of you probably heard before. So George Mallory had attempted Everest 3 times before. This was, I think, his 4th attempt. So George Mallory was, this is part of the mystery, I guess, that's kind of unfolds in this particular expedition. 1924, Mallory and Irvine. He was an engineer. They were chosen because he was young, strong, and he had this incredible mind. He improved a lot of the oxygen bottles, the oxygen canisters to make them more efficient. So just a really smart kid. And so he chose him. So these 2 guys set out to make the summit. Now, they weren't the first to make the attempt at the summit on that expedition, but the summit attempt failed, and so it opened up the window for these 2 guys to make the summit push. So 1924, I believe it was in June of 1924, I remember the exact date, they started off for their last push from Camp 6 that they had established coming from the north side. Again, remember the southeast ridge was not open at that point. And so the mystery behind it, I think this is one of these 2 guys, is a guy named Noel Odell. He was recorded as being the last person to see these 2 men, Mallory and Irvine, on the high ridge. He said 600 feet from the summit. So we do know that they died because Mallory's body was found in 1999 on an expedition. And so, yes. So for not that long, his body was on the mountain, but just no one ever saw it. And so they went there specifically because what they want to know is, did they summit? The big controversy was, we all know about 1953 Edmund Hillary. He was credited for being the first person to summit. But the question is, did they actually make it to the top first? So there's the mystery that's wrapped into it. The mystery that's buried on Mount Everest because, again, they died. We know that. And so there have been a lot of attempts, expeditions that have gone back to try to retrace their steps, very highly qualified and very skilled climbers, trying to do the exact same thing that they did without using any ladders or fixed lines or ropes, just climbing with the gear that they would have, came to the conclusion that there's no way that those guys were capable of doing it, whereas other mountaineers said, I'm sure they could have.
What do you think?
Personally, I'm going to leave that for your own. I will tell you that I am on one of the 2 camps. We can get back afterwards if you guys want to talk about it. I just don't want to make somebody think, well, because a guy summited, then he must know whether they made it to the top or not. I will say it was a very, very tall challenge for them to do it. So it would have been an extremely impressive event and a feat if they pulled it off. Now, what the big thing is that they had cameras with them. They had a little vest pocket cameras. And so the idea behind it is when the 99 expedition went back to find their bodies, the question was, can we find the camera? And they had Kodak engineers who were telling them, if you find the camera, this is how you have to bring it back to preserve the pictures. Because the idea being, if it's been frozen for so long, they could actually pull images off of there. There was a lost expedition in Antarctica. The film was stashed away in these cameras for, I think, about a century, and they found the cameras and developed them. It's unbelievable, the clarity of the pictures. They're almost like today's technology. And so it is possible, if you found the camera, that could prove, because they would have taken a picture at the summit, and that would have proved that they were actually there. Now, obviously, they made it down. They died on the way down. So Mallory's body was found, and just recently, I think it was last year on an expedition, they found, I don't mean to be grisly about this, but if you get locked into a glacier, glacier's moving down the mountain, they just grind stuff apart. They actually found Irvine's foot in a boot. And so that's kind of closure for their family, but it doesn't really help us with, like, if that camera's up there, it could be anywhere. And it could be ground up in the glacier and nobody would ever find it.
The camera wasn't on Mallory's body?
No camera on Mallory's body. So the mystery, that's part of what I'm saying, is like even now in an attempt to solve the mystery, it gets even bigger. Because now you've got expeditions that have spent a lot of time. So that's Mallory Irvine, that's the history. You can see where as a climber, you get wrapped up in that. And then, of course, the next picture, this is actually Tenzing Norgay. So 1953, Sir Edmund Hillary, a British climber, and Norgay, who was actually on the 1920s expedition. On this particular one in 1953, that was Norgay's 7th time to be on Mount Everest on an expedition. So he'd served his tour of duty, so it's not like he was just some guy they chose. He'd earned his keep on the mountain. And so it's very interesting because the first two people to have technically successfully ever summited, at least recorded, Hillary, there's no photograph. One picture was taken on the summit. And Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the guy that everybody was putting their hopes on, he was claiming it for Britain, didn't even get a picture taken. He just wanted to take a picture of the Sherpa. That says a lot about his character. So,
Did you stand on that exact spot when you were there?
I don't know if it was just those two places, but I was on that area. It's about this, a little bit bigger than the stage, the actual part that's the highest point. So I did step on
Explain his
that.
headgear.
Yeah, so that's some pretty ancient technology. Oxygen masks, and they weigh a lot. They're much more technology now. They're still heavy, but not like that.
Let me ask you this question, because you try to visualize this, and you come up the Hillary step in the last part, and it looks like a slope, but you can't always see the slope. When you get to that point right over there, is there a complete drop off on the other side, so that if you slip, you just fall?
I'm assuming, based upon where we stood and how you normally take summit pictures, that that's looking towards China, into Tibet at the time. So there's a cone-shaped face. I think we have some of the pictures. Stephen picked up one that showed it, like kind of the drop-off. But that's 7,000 feet straight down. And it's 5,000 feet down this way. So you don't want to just go running around all the time. And I will say this because it permeates, because again, Hillary knows he's claiming this. He's the first person documented the summit. But this is what happened, because for the longest time there was a lot of mystery, because these two guys were the only ones going up, and there was a rope between them. That's just part of what you do when you're on high mountaineering travel, because if one falls, you're going to stop the other one from falling. So there's strength in numbers. But anyway, when they're going up on these ropes, the question came up, and it was asked for Norgay for 7 to 8 years after the summit. He was silent on it. He would never tell anybody. The question was, well, who actually got to the top first? I mean, we know who's credited for climbing it, but who actually, was it you, and then you just said Hillary made it to the top? And the reality was, after about 7 or 8 years, he finally said that he didn't summit first. He said Hillary summited first, and it wasn't like he was staying back to allow him to get the glory. Hillary was a strong enough climber where he was actually physically making it to the top first. But that's a big thing for someone to admit, because there's no other audience to verify that. But to say to them, like, I wasn't, he was, that's a big deal. And it says a lot about both of their characters. But this is what the story says. Hillary has actually said this in interviews. He's obviously passed away at this point. But he said, because he was the first one up there, he went over, because they came in from the southeast side, from the Nepal side, not the route that Mallory and Irvine had taken. He did peer over to the north side to see if there was any evidence that someone else had already been there. So again, that mystery had even permeated their mentality. His defense over all the time, he was never worried that they might find that those other two guys actually had made it before he did, because he said something that's very important. And in mountaineering, you really need to adopt this as your mantra. He said, if they made it to the top first, that's great, but they didn't successfully climb the mountain because they're dead. So it's summiting is optional, coming back down alive is mandatory. So a true successful climb would be someone who summited and made it back down the table. So that's his defense. Like, even if we do find out that they did make it to the top, somehow we can prove that, it wasn't really truly a successful summit, because a lot of people have made it to the top and didn't make it down, and I don't think anybody would argue that that really wasn't a successful climb, especially family members.
Hey, do you want to say something about the difference between a modern rope and the ropes they were using?
Yeah, so I mean, this is obviously a modern climbing rope. This is a dynamic climbing rope. A lot of what they have up there is more static lines, but you can imagine 300 people all had their weight pulling up on this rope. You think about that when you're on that rope, you think there's 300 of us on this rope. I don't think it's really designed for that. But they had hemp ropes a lot up there, just really big, thick, heavy hemp ropes. And they didn't have fixed lines, so they just would walk. They would have Sherpas that would put up fixed lines if it was something they had to repeat over and over again, a particular part of the route. But they had these ropes just attached between the two of them. And again, that's just glacier travel. Somebody falls, you self-arrest to stop both of you from going down.
How
But
many
again,
were in your group?
we had 10 climbers that were in our group, and of the 10 that we had climbing Everest, 7 of them summited. And so 3 of them, 1 of them had to go back way down the mountains, get pulmonary edema, which is when your lungs start to fill with fluid, which is a dangerous, obviously the 2 dangerous things, pulmonary and then cerebral edema, where your brain swells. Those are the deadly things that are going to happen on high altitude climbing to somebody, and you never know who. So he had to go down earlier on, and then the 2 of them, the other 2, were actually on their summit push, and they both had to stop. One of them made a good choice because he ultimately was flown back to Kathmandu with pneumonia, and the other guy was just hammered. He was gone. You could just tell he just didn't have what it took. And so they both made really wise choices.
Yeah.
Some could argue that maybe I should have, but I didn't. And so, but I'm still here, so grace of God, luck, whatever you want to say. But all right, let's keep moving on again. I love the questions. So when you go to climb Mount Everest, everybody's going to trek to the base camp of Mount Everest. Some people will go just to do the trek to the base camp of Mount Everest. This is the route you take. Everybody flies in. If you're coming in to do the southeast route, not coming in from Tibet or China, you're going to come in and land in this airport called Lukla. Lukla's about 9,000 feet in altitude, and it has the worst airport in the world. There is a short runway right on the mountains, and so if you're flying an airplane, that's your first, most dangerous thing you're going to do on the mountain. We flew helicopters, so it doesn't make any difference how short the runway is. But anyway, that's
Have the ramp at the end of it.
yeah, so it's a sloped runway, so they land going uphill to slow them down fast, and then they go downhill to give them more speed on the takeoff, and at the end it just goes off into the mountains. So if it doesn't work out, you're not turning around, you're committed. Once you go down that ramp, it's a done deal. So from Lukla, it depends on, again, your group. We made our stop from Lukla to Phak Ding, and then Namche Bazaar, which is kind of the unofficial capital of Sherpas. I'll throw this in really quickly. We all, when we think about climbers on the mountain, natives, Nepalese, we call them all Sherpas. We use that terminology incorrectly. Sherpas actually is a tribe of people. Centuries ago in Tibet, a group of people were told about this magical, incredible valley called the Khumbu Valley, which is the Khumbu Valley leading up to Mount Everest, which is pretty much this, about how amazing it is and how you can do agriculture and just all the amazing things that you could do there. So these Tibetans migrated to an eastern part of the Khumbu Valley. So Sherpa actually means east people. So if you hear somebody, so at any time a Sherpa, his name is given, like Phang Purba Sherpa. They always have Sherpa at the end. That's not part of their name, that just indicates their tribe. So on the mountain, when we have people who are climbing, there are porters up there that would carry stuff, Sherpas that would help with climbing and carry stuff. And if you call them all Sherpas, some people would take offense at it. The Sherpas would take offense at it because not all of them are Sherpas. And that's kind of a national pride type thing. But also the porters didn't like it because I'm not a Sherpa, I'm a different tribe. So anyway, just kind of an aside there. The Namche Bazaar is kind of the unofficial capital. That was about, I think, 17,000 feet. Then Tangushe all the way up to, this is Everest Base Camp. It's right at the base. That's about 17,500 feet. So you're going to be doing that trek 9 days to get to that. So everybody who's climbing is going to have to do that trek at some point or another, some flash of another. Let's keep moving. All right, so all along the track, there's a lot of iconic things that you'll see on your trek in. One of the things most people associate is the bridges over the river there. So this is the Hillary Bridge, named after Edmund Hillary. Obviously way up in the air. That's famous because it's long and really high. I think that's the old version of it. If you're interested in bungee jumping, they use that for bungee jumping now. But, so that's the Doji River. So that's a lot what you see. You're going through a valley and you're crossing back and forth over these suspension bridges. Again, stop me if you need to, go on the way where they just keep marching through. So as you trek through, you're going to see a lot of monasteries. The Tangushe Monastery is one of the oldest and biggest monasteries in Nepal. So we went in there and get our blessing. We had a ceremony there. These are some of our climbers that were on a trip. Some of them were just trekkers. But just amazing. It's just incredible. That thing was wiped out multiple times by earthquakes and then rebuilt, but it is still one of the oldest ones. Keep going through. So this was our first view of Everest on a trek in. So this is Mount Everest, the peak right there. This is Lobe. This particular was, why am I'm blanking on this?
Lhotse?
Lhotse, yeah. I can't think. So that's Lhotse. So Everest is in a bowl, and so Everest is there. There's Nuptse here, Lhotse there, and then Everest is in a big bowl. And then this is a really iconic peak called Ama de Blanc. I hope to go back to the Himalayas to climb mountains. It's the Matterhorn of the Himalayas because it looks very similar to that. And there's a picture of Ama de Blanc here, a little bit closer as we're hiking in. So you can see that it's very sharply.
Yeah, that's not Everest though, right?
Not Everest, no. That's 23,000 feet at the summit, very technical up at the top. But if I go back to the Himalayas, that's the one I'll go back to. All right, so as we're making our trek in through, this is Everest Base Camp. Ever heard anything about Everest Base Camp? Nowadays with climbers there, the base camp, basically you can see all the tents here. This is the Khumbu Glacier coming off the mountain. It's about 1.5 miles of tents. So there's 800 climbers and who knows how many people. There's cooks, porters, all kinds of stuff. There's probably more than 3,000 people there during the season. Unfortunately, because it's good and bad, convenient now that everything can be brought in by helicopters, but by about 6 in the morning till about 4 in the afternoon, it's just helicopters flying. It's just all over. But anyway, that's just part of the commercialization of the mountain. West shoulder, and that's the peak. So that was basically my backyard for a month.
Is Everest on that picture?
Yeah, Everest is right here. Yeah. So that's what you're saying. So I'm standing on a peak called Pumori, which is across the valley. This is the shoulder, west shoulder of Everest, so coming down is that part there. Changxi is a peak in the back. That's actually in China or Tibet. So the border, Everest literally sits right on the border of to Nepal and Tibet, or China now. So.
Did you just say you stayed there for about a month?
So yeah, you're there for 1.5 months doing acclimatizing climbs. So your goal is to acclimatizing is just your body makes more red blood cells. Physiologically, that's how you become more acclimatized. More red blood cells, the more oxygen you can carry. Oxygen is obviously much thinner up top. So it's not that there's less oxygen, it's just that the oxygen molecules are farther apart. So when you breathe in, there's just not that much available to you. And so your body has to be really efficient at carrying whatever oxygen that it can get. So you're there for 1.5 months doing training climbs. The Khumbu Icefall, you go up this to get to the mountains. The big bowl is up here, so Nuptse is here, Lhotse's back there. The big bowl is there, and then Everest is up here. So this Khumbu Icefall is called the deadliest 2.5 miles on the planet because it's just a shooting gallery. If anything comes down off these mountains, you see all these big, huge, they call them seracs, big blocks of ice. They come down, they're coming down in there on top of you. And so an earthquake, you cause that. We saw avalanches all the time at night. You'd hear rock fall constantly when you're trying to sleep. So it's just like a shooting gallery. But this Khumbu Icefall, that's where you have to go up to begin your climb. And there's no other mountain in the world that has that. And so that's what makes Everest very unique and obviously kind of dangerous in its own right.
So do you go up, but then come down and then go up?
So that's a good question. So you're supposed to do rotations up the mountain. They used to, back in the day, they would do probably 6 rotations up the mountain.
Yeah.
But they want to limit the amount of time now that you're in that ice fall. So now they do training climbs on other peaks where you don't have to go through the ice fall. So you'll do, they call it just a rotation where you go up the mountain and then you touch Camp 3, we'll talk about that in just a second, come all the way back down, and then you climb all these other peaks for part of that acclimatization, and then you only go back through the ice fall when you do your summit push.
Okay.
So you're doing 2 round trips through rather than 6 round trips.
Yeah.
Obviously, it stacks the odds in your favor. You're in there less time, that's less time. Now there are people who have to keep track of all that. They're called ice fall doctors, about 15 guys, and their sole purpose is to maintain, I'll show you ladders and fixed lines, and they're probably in there 70 or more times.
And they go up every day.
Every day.
Oh.
All right, so moving along, again, we'll try to make sure we're going to honor everybody's time, but so this is our training climb, Lobuche Peak. So you can see that even on a training climb, you're getting into some pretty technical stuff. Everything starts early in the morning when you're doing summit attempts, so we're doing stuff from headlamps in the morning, so that's the terrain that you're going up.
Now, are you walking on rock very often?
Yeah, there's some mixed stuff, and that's we were talking about that, Steve and Mary and I were talking about those crampons right there, the spikes on the boots that are actually boots that we wore. They don't do well on rocks, but you can't just decide you're not going to wear them. So obviously if you put some metal on rocks, they just don't do well. So you've got a lot of grip even on icy terrain, but not on rocks. But that's where a lot of that stuff Now here we didn't have our crampons on, or we put crampons on before we got on the snow and ice. On Everest, there's an actual point where you put your crampons on. You don't have to do them up to a certain point in the ice fall. Good questions. All right, moving along. That's our puja ceremony. The Sherpas are mostly Buddhist, and so they have a very strong Buddhist tradition, and they follow the Buddhist tradition. So you get a lama, that's a local holy man, come up to do a puja ceremony. It's hard to describe. It's about 3 hours of them reciting, the lamas reciting stuff. They'll play instruments and they'll chant, and then you're sitting in the sun, just baking, and then they have all the stuff they bring. You're supposed to bring your climbing gear to get blessed. They have all the food and stuff. And then when they're done, they just crack open all that stuff and you eat it all. It's just a very strange, but it's a kind of a cool celebration. The Sherpas will do these unique native dances too. It's just a cool, it's a party kind of thing, but there's a lot of reverence because Sherpas are very superstitious and climbers inherit that. So a lot of climbers were following a lot of the Buddhist traditions, not because they were Buddhist, because they're superstitious. And so the idea behind the Sherpas is they're trying to get access on the mountain because they believe that the mountain is a god, and so our goddess in this particular case. So Sargamatha is what the Sherpas call Everest. And so they're actually trying to gain the favor of the goddess to ask permission to be on the mountain. So climbers will adhere to that because they're very superstitious. I'm not superstitious, but I didn't want to offend the people's culture either.
Did you find yourself becoming more spiritual when you're on the climb? You're not superstitious, but did you find some spirituality there?
Not Buddhist spirituality, yes, but as a man of faith, yes. I felt prayers from people back home. I felt the presence of God, and I say this. Some people won't buy into this, as though some people wouldn't buy into Buddhism, but I feel like sometimes God winks at us. And I feel like I got a wink a couple times on the mountain, and there were some very specific things. I'll tell you a little bit more about that if you're interested, but very, very distinct. It was not just coincidental on the mountain. So yes, in that respect, very much so. Good question. So base camp is down here. That's what you saw in the picture. Khumbu Icefall is this right through here, 2.5 miles, basically about 1,500 feet up, vertical feet, and there's just all kinds of dangers. I'll show you pictures in just a minute so you can actually see viscerally what it looks like to go through that. No walk in the park. Camp 1, we stayed there on our rotation up. By the time we came back to do our summit pushes, Camp 1 just didn't exist really much anymore because they don't use it, they bypass it. Camp 2, just at the base of that side of Mount Everest right there. And so that's 23,000 feet. Camp 3 is hacked off into the side of the Lhotse face, and so you get like a terrace. You're sleeping in your tent, and there's a drop off of about 10 feet to the next terrace, and then there's a drop off of 10 feet to the next terrace, and then there's 3,000 feet.
So when you're in Camp 3,
You don't get up and walk. Yeah, right. So you don't get up and walk around. In fact, there was a guy earlier in our season that did take a step out of his tent, didn't have his crampons on, which you just don't do, and took off. Unfortunately, he survived, but I mean, you don't want to wake up to that. Camp 3 to Camp 4. Camp 4 is at the South Col. Col is just a word that means basically collars. There's a saddle between Lhotse and Everest. That's 26,000 feet, and above 26,000 feet, the summit's 29,035. That 3,000 feet, you're in the death zone. So 26,000 feet up, people aren't supposed to be there. So your body is literally dying, even with supplemental oxygen on. So they want to limit the amount of time you're in that. You should not be in that more than 24 hours. Ooh. And so if you're there for more than 24 hours, probably things are going to go bad.
Now, Greg, we chatted about this earlier. You know, you might just think to yourself, well, if you had oxygen, you would be fine. But the reality is you're dying because of the pressure changes, right?
Right.
So your cellular metabolism isn't working properly.
So your vital organs actually start shutting down. So your brain is actually very stingy. Your brain will take oxygen from any part of your body because your brain has to have oxygen to survive. And so your body will sacrifice fingers and toes because oxygen is going to go to the brain. The brain has to maintain warmth and also has to function. And so if your brain is stealing what limited oxygen there is, your vital organs will start to shut down. And so the pressure change, what that does is pulmonary edema is when your lungs start to fill with fluid. So you think about if you're going up higher where there's less pressure, the pressure of your body still exists. It's still You're pressurized to 17,000 feet at base camp, which is not here, but that still means your internal pressure and your external pressure, there's a difference, pretty substantial difference. When you inhale right now, the partial pressure of oxygen, it forces the oxygen into your bloodstream. Well, if you're at that altitude, when you do that, that's not effectively taking place, and so you're not getting enough oxygen transfusing across the membranes into your lungs, so you're not getting oxygen into your bloodstream, so every organ will suffer for that. So you don't feel like eating because your digestive system is basically shutting down. So where you need to get as many calories as you can, you don't want to eat. And so you can't sleep. Your heart's always racing. So if you're in the medical profession, pulse oximeter, if you have the things that put on your finger, they detect your blood saturation and your oxygen saturation in your bloodstream. So if you're around here, it's probably somewhere between 96 to 100%. And that would be good. If it gets below that, you're in danger. If it gets down in the low 90s, you'd be in the hospital. So at base camp at 17,500 feet, pulse oximeter goes on. I didn't bring one with me, so I couldn't check it all along the way. Pulse oximeter goes on. Mine was 89. And so here, I would be in the hospital, and there would be emergency medical procedures going on. There, they said, oh, that's cool, it's about average. That's just what you expect at that altitude. I have no idea. I know some of them took theirs at Camp 4, but I would imagine at Camp 4 it was probably in the 70s. And so again, what I'm saying by that is when you get into even below the death zone, but into the death zone, your body is literally, they don't call it the death zone because it's cool and want to scare people away. It's literally your body is dying. We are not designed to be at that altitude.
Greg, show them on the map where the western coom is and tell them something about the coom.
So coom is it's a weird word. It's spelled C-W-M. How do you get coom out of that? But it's Welsh. It's a Welsh word, and it actually means, I think it's a valley if I'm not mistaken. So western coom refers to this stretch right through here. And that's, again, you're always at risk because you're below big slopes. You don't know a lot about demographics of mountains. If you're at the bottom of a big slope and there's a lot of ice and rock above you, if it falls, it's coming down to you. It's like a funnel. There's no other, it's not like a rock is going to do that. It's going to do that. And so you're always in danger. There's no way to get around it. So the whole time you're in the western coom, you're in danger. From Camp 2 to Camp 4 is 5,000 vertical feet. And so when you're on that slope, you're just like this for hours on end. I'll show you pictures. So that kind of gives you an orientation of the southeast ridge route. This is the one that Hillary and Norgay took. All the 1920s expeditions came in from the north side. They were going up that side right there. Just kind of give you a little orientation.
And about temperature on the coom too.
So yes, on the coom, the western coom, you're getting sun coming down. There's sun reflected from all the ice around you, so it's actually hot there. So you probably could climb that section with your shirt off. You probably wouldn't want to, but you could. So it gets really hot there, and once you get to Camp 2, especially if you get in the shade, it gets very cold. Camp 3 and 4 are horrific. You would not want to climb with your shirt off there, for sure.
Can you put a number on horrific?
So 70-mile gusts of wind. So the thing about Mount Everest is that it's so high that the reason why there's a very narrow window of opportunity to climb, and it's always April, May, mostly it's the middle part of May, is because for most of the year, the jet stream is blowing across the top of Mount Everest. So 180-mile-an-hour winds across, so nobody's climbing on that. So when you look at Everest pictures and you see this, the peak, and this big white thing going this way, this plume of, that's actually because it's getting blasted by the wind. So Mount Everest doesn't have a lot of snow accumulation on top because it just gets blown off. But for about 3 or 4 weeks out of the year, the jet stream deviates, so that opens up that window. That's why everybody descends there. You get 800 people trying to make it to that small little space on the top. And all those people are vying for that one place because the jet stream is away. Except this year, that was not true. The jet stream is still going there. So horrific would be when we got up in the morning to do our climb, our summit push from 4 to the summit. We got up at midnight and then started walking up at 1 o'clock. So it's all headlamps, 70-mile-an-hour gusts of wind. So you think about, well, okay, that's a lot of wind. But what you don't realize is that when you're standing on a very precipitous slope, and a wind gust like that hits you, it can literally knock you off the mount. And you're keenly aware of that every time it almost knocks you off.
And temperatures below 0.
Oh, yeah, so in Camp 4 at night, pretty good chance that we were about negative 35 Fahrenheit. And that's just ambient air temperature, not with your wind chill. So there's no telling. If you're standing out in the wind, just a perfect example, I did not, you can actually get a personal Sherpa that's with you the entire climb, and they're doing a lot of stuff for you. They're carrying 20 pounds of your gear. I didn't have the money for that. So I had to carry all my own stuff. And I meant
It's the backpack with the weights.
Right, so you can come up here and pick that up. That's what I had to carry up the mountain. So I had to put on my crampons by myself, all transitions on the ropes I'm doing myself. So in the morning when we were getting up to go, I had to put on my crampons, and I can't put those with those big goofy gloves on. There's no dexterity to that. So glove liners. And in glove liners in that wind, I was losing, my fingers, I could tell they were going. And so just in the short, maybe 5 to 10 minutes it took me to put my crampons on, I was getting dangerously close to frostbite or frostnip. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. That's the working definition of horrific. Pretty good definition. All right, so really quickly, I just want to show you what I was doing, like the route, so you know what's happening when you see pictures. So you'll see, first of all, Khumbu Icefall. This is the Khumbu Icefall. These blocks of ice are so big that they're like apartment-sized blocks of ice. So it's not like a little ice cube. And the whole thing is moving 4 to 6 feet every day. So every day everything changes. And so the way you navigate through all these crevasses, the big cracks in the ice could be 700, 800, 900 feet deep. You go in those, you're not coming out. So it's just creepy. You can hear the whole thing moving. It's crazy. It makes these crazy popping and creaking noises. So you have to put ladders across the crevasses, or you jump over them. That's one of the couple places along the way they said, get a good running jump and run and jump. This is the ladder. So there's 3 ladders just lashed together. That's what they do. And you prop that up there and climb up this. And this is Susan. She was one of the women on our trip. I'm not saying this because I'm trying to get some badge of honor, but I just need you to understand when you get a Sherpa, how different that makes your life on the mountain. This is what a pack looks like when a Sherpa's carrying your gear, but that's what a pack looks like when the Sherpa's not carrying your gear.
So when you're in the middle of that ladder and you're looking down at that giant hole in the ice, how come you just didn't freak out and freeze?
Well, you don't. You realize you can't. That's not an option. Once you get on the mountain, you realize that some things that might be an actual human response to things, you just have to quell that. You just really have to push that down because it won't work to your advantage. That's a vertical ladder, but those ladders also are thrown down horizontally across these cracks, and so you're walking on those crampons. You have to put your crampons, the points of your crampons, spanning the rungs of the ladder. So you're looking, that's not even like, I don't even have to look down if I'm climbing a ladder. I don't have to look down there, but I do have to look down at my feet to know that I'm putting them in the right place. And so just beyond your feet, the 900 feet is the background of that. So you just have to put some survival instincts that are pre-wired into human beings aside to realize that that just won't be productive right now.
How much is a Sherpa? I should start saving up.
Well, not to get too much into detail, I don't usually tell, but yes, 18 grand for a Sherpa and some extra oxygen. And clearly that was not an option. So I don't know, even if I had 18 grand to just throw around, if I would have gotten one. In some ways, now I'm proud of the fact that I didn't have a Sherpa. On the mountain, I was hating every minute of it. As I saw these people running circles around me.
Were there men and women in your group?
Yeah, we had 2 women climbers.
Tell them about Susan.
Susan was 65 years old. She climbed. She actually was on Everest the year prior, so 2024. And she had pulmonary edema, some kind of an issue with her lungs, and she had to turn around at Camp 3. So she was determined to come back. Most people, when they do that, if they don't make it to the summit, they're just driven to come back. I don't think I could have because it's expensive to climb Mount Everest. And for me, I think it was a one and done. I probably would be standing up here telling you a different story if I hadn't made it to the top, because I probably would be scheming how I could go back. It's just the way our minds work. But I don't have that kind of disposable income.
And Susan is the
Did she
first
make it the
woman
second?
of...
Yes, she did make it the second time. So she has dual citizenship. She is British originally, but she has dual citizenship. So she's American and British citizenship. So she's the oldest dual citizen, British, English woman to climb the mountain. So I guess everybody wants a first, you know. I was the first. I live in a small town called Pulaski, Mississippi. I can say with assurance, population 312, I'm the first. We want a bunch of firsts. So this is looking down from the, basically at Camp 1, so this is the top part of the ice fall. Even up there, it's still bad. There's crevasses that are covered with snow. It's very dangerous. That's Pomori Peak, very popular peak. People climb that too. I think that's Cho-O-U. That's probably, I think, the 7th highest peak on the planet back there. That's Lingtron. And so this is basically, base camp is way down there, coming up the ice fall, and then we're at Camp 1 right now. So I think it's about 19,000 feet, right about here. This is looking up from Camp 2, which is about 23,000 feet up the Lhotse face. You can almost see the route going up the mountain, light colored there. So going up, this is Camp 3. It looks deceptively close because you think, oh, it's just right there. And that's 8 hours later.
It also looks deceptively flat.
Yeah, it does look deceptively flat. You'll get a better idea of how steep that is. So from Camp 2 to over here, this is the Geneva Spur. You go around that, that's the saddle, the South Col, just below where Camp 4 is.
And that's the saddle between Lhotse and Everest.
Yeah, and so this is the route you go up. This is called the Yellow Band. There's actually a rock formation that goes through most of the Himalayas, but certainly through there. And you can see it very distinctly. It's a yellow band of different kind of rock. And so it goes right through here, but you have to climb over that section, the Yellow Band. It's one of the more technical parts of the day because you're actually climbing over rocks and ice. It gets kind of dangerous. So that's looking down the Lhotse face. So you're on that for basically 6 hours, just on that slope. And so you can see that's Camp 2 way down there. It's Camp 2. Camp 3 is hacked out on the ridge somewhere down there. So it looks deceptive when you're looking at it from a distance. You go, it's steep, but it ain't that steep. And then you get on and you realize, well,
Are you guys on oxygen right there?
not here. Yes, this is our summit push. So this is the highest we've gotten up. So what we did to just kind of stack the odds in our favor, we started using oxygen from Camp 2, which was our rotation. We had done Camp 2 to Camp 3 without oxygen. We didn't really need it there. They're trying to saturate our bodies with oxygen. So we started at Camp 2, we had oxygen all the way at the summit and then back down. So, yeah. And that's the Yellow Band, so you can see how technical that gets through there. It's one person at a time, so it's a bottleneck when you get to that. And it's very physically demanding and exhausting because you think about you're not just walking up your feet, you're pulling up with your hands too.
And you can see the different kinds of texture, terrain.
Ice, lots of ice, lots of rock. So again, the crampons do well even on that stuff. They don't do well on the rocks.
So are you having to take the crampons off to get over the rocks, or you just kind of
Make sure you put them in a place where they're not going to slide off.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so this is Camp 4. Unfortunately, some things about Everest that you may have heard are actually true. So Camp 4 is a landfill. It's just horribly trashed. There have been a lot of expeditions that have gone through solely for the purpose of cleaning up and carrying trash down. Old tents, food, all kind of oxygen bottles are still left behind. You can kind of almost see that down here. All just stuff that's abandoned there at Camp 4. So it's kind of disheartening when you get there, but you realize that there's not really much you can do about that on your own. Because if you start from there going down, you can't carry it. You can carry something down, but not much. So they do expeditions for that. But this is the route going up. This is actually the summit pyramid from Camp 4. The triangular face, the route, you can almost see it going up. It goes up this couloir, that's a big sheet of ice and snow, to the balcony. The balcony, it's an eternity from the balcony going up to, that's called the South Summit. That's not the actual summit, but that's just what you can see from Camp 4. And the 5,000 foot there, 7,000 feet on that side.
Is Hillary Steps shown there?
Not on this one, but the next one will show. So this is what that looks like from an aerial view. So that's the Camp 4 right there. You can see just a little bit of it right there. So what we were just looking at, you look at that route going up to the balcony. What we could see from Camp 4 was the South Summit. That's not the actual summit, but the summit's far in the back where you can't see it from down there. This is the longest stretch of any climb that I think I've ever done in my life. When I got to the balcony and I could look up and see all these people way above me, I thought, this is going to be a long day. And that was very windy there too. Even when the sun came out, it still was extremely windy.
How far is that, Greg?
So from here to there is 3,000, a little over 3,000 vertical feet. Probably, if you were just doing mileage-wise, maybe 5 miles total. So a lot of elevation in a very short time.
And there's no camp, that's the last
Right,
time you
that's
came,
it.
you did that all in one.
If you go up here and something goes wrong, and you just come back down. You don't. And so the two guys that turned around right through this section. Now what happened for us on our summit day, we were on the last day that you could summit. They basically closed the mountain down. I know it sounds weird, but so we do that on purpose. Our guide does that because at the end of the season, there's less crowds. It's a risky run because if the weather's bad, you're done. You don't have the ability to wait it out. So anyway, when we were in this section right here, headlamps dark, and we kept seeing rocks coming down and snow rolling down, but I could see a bunch of headlights in front of me. I just assumed that those headlamps were people coming down who had already summited. As they were passing us, just covered sheets of ice on them, telling us you can't finish, nobody's going to summit today. Probably over 100 climbers passed us, saying it's going to be impossible to summit. Our guide said it's a calculated decision, let's keep going. We kept pushing up, and really, really windy and extremely cold. But because they all came down, we didn't have the crowds at the top. So the last section, Hillary Step, I'll show you, we could count the number of people on it. Normally there's 300 people on that section.
So you started climbing at the South Col of Camp 4 like around midnight. About what time is it when you're at the balcony?
So I got to the balcony right as sun rose. This is one of those for me. It was hard to take pictures because you got to dig a bunch of stuff out to get your camera out. And I was trying to save the battery for the summit. And so this section right through here, just close underneath the balcony, the sun was just coming up on the horizon. So there's that really orange band and dark, deep purple above it. Just seeing the sun come up, I could see all these peaks down below, but there was a slight crescent moon. It was a waxing crescent of the moon. And then Venus was right next to it. It was the coolest thing. The image is burned in my brain. I kept thinking, I hope somebody's taking a picture of this. But I guess ultimately that was just for me. But yeah, that was really cool. So the South Summit, once you make it to that, you've got to drop down to a notch. There's a long section of cornices. How the Grinch Stole Christmas. You see that cartoon? You get these way out leaning pieces of snow that get blown over a mountain. That happens in real life. When wind keeps blowing and blowing, it just keeps building this bridge out that's unsupported underneath. You don't want to stand on the cornice because it collapses. You're done. Conching face, 7,000 feet. Cornice ridge. Then you get to a section. It's really technical because it's rock climbing. And then the Hillary Step is there. It was about 60 vertical feet before you get to the summit is what the Hillary Step used to be. There's controversy about this. They said in 2015 that the big boulder, I think that's actually the boulder, they say fell down, and now it's the Hillary ramp. So instead of a vertical 60-foot section, it's a 60-foot, 50-degree ramp. It's still, when you're there and you're on oxygen and you're hammered, I don't care if it's a step or a ramp, whatever you call it, it's difficult to do. And then you go through basically the summit ridge, which you'll see pictures of, but you can see those cornices are pretty big up there, and then ultimately up to
So
the
is
summit.
that two-way traffic? I mean, it looks
Yeah.
like it's, what do you do?
So you got a fixed line there, and so when you're going up the fixed line, this is an ascender. You slide it up, it won't come down, but it will slide up. And you're not supposed to pull on the rope. You're just there in case you fall, it keeps you from falling off the mountain. But when somebody's coming the opposite direction, you gotta swap. So you gotta clip around them, and they gotta clip around you. And so if there's a lot of people up there, it can take a long time. A lot of my friends, two of my friends tried to summit. One of them turned around at the South Summit, one of them turned out just at the Cornice Ridge, because the lines were so long of people going to the summit, they were standing there for 3 hours, freezing, running out of oxygen. And they said, well, this is my summit.
Wow.
So when you were clipping around, you were not tethered?
Well, you have to make sure you're always clipped in, so you have two. So you can see I have one to an ascender, and I have one that's just a carabiner. So what you would do is you just clip this around, unclip that one, and clip it around. So you always want to be attached to the mountain. Sherpas don't do that. They'll just unclip and start running down stuff and then clip it in, almost like the ship, but they're Sherpas, not me. This is that last section, basically Hillary Step, the Hillary Ramp is right up there. And so you can see this on a normal day. So the 18th and 19th were big summit days for 2025. Probably 300 people on each of the days. That long line of people. Because those 800 people came down, that's what we got. I mean, you can count the number of people on that section. It's rare. You never see that.
And that was 8 hours, you said?
For me, at this point, at the bottom of the South Summit, I think I was 9 hours into it, and probably another hour and a half. It seems very deceptive, but from there to the summit was another hour and a half. seems like, oh, you just get there in 30 minutes. That's what gets people in trouble, because that's not how it works. And then that's looking back down that summit ridge. So this is the actual summit. That's the ridge, and then dropping down, the Hillary step is beyond that low
You can
face
see
there.
the cornices.
Yeah, so you can see those cornices
Yeah.
dropping off right there.
Yeah.
So if you stood on that, that would be the worst place on the planet where you could stand. You don't want to be there for any length of time, because if it collapses, again, game over. And then ultimately, a month and a half leading up to basically the money shot, so to speak, which is that. That's me at the top of the world. This is a novelty thing. Everything except that sleeping bag, everything that was on that table is in that picture. So all that stuff was at the top of the world. Backpack, again, you can pick up if you want. I just brought a couple other things if you wanted to see. Love to entertain. That's me. That base camp, you can see what a physical toll it takes. I looked like I was in a fight and lost, and then got in another fight.
So that's your group of 10 or something?
So some of it had already taken off, some of it actually helicoptered out. So head guy Garrett Madison, that was his 15th Everest summit.
Oh,
He's tied with another American, David Hahn. They both have 15 summits for Americans. Next year, he's already going to plan a trip. Of course, he's going to go back. If he summits, he'll have the most number of summits for an American at 16. There is a Sherpa there, Kamerita is his name. He was on the mountain when we were there, who had just finished his 31st. So obviously that's going to be a really difficult record to make. One of our assistant guides, another assistant guide, he's actually from Argentina. Susan, she's the dual citizenship, she's 65. Two of the other climbers, that was another climber there, two of our climbers, and then now the base camp doctor, me and some of the other ones.
so you had a doctor with you, is that part of it?
At base camp, there's actually a tent. There's a facility there, and the doctors will stay there. Physicians will come out from all over the country, all over the world, and they'll actually serve their tour duty in the Everest Base Camp hospital, and they're there for about 2 months. And so they see everything. There's going to tell them what they have to be ready for.
What can you tell us about how you prepare? I mean, it's not just going,
Right.
and they don't take everybody, so what did you have to do to show that you had a shot?
So the things that you can prepare for mentally, physically you can prepare. It's hard to know mentally how to prepare for that. What I had going for me mentally was I've been on other expeditions to Antarctica, for example, and I know it's just suffering. When you tell people that the trip is just a month and a half of suffering, and how much suffering can the human body endure, and ultimately how much suffering can you as a person say, like, I'm just done. That's a lot of times people check out because they're done. It's hard to prepare for that because there's no way to replicate that. There's no way to replicate day after day after day of living in altitude and your body shutting down. There's just no way to repeat that. Physically, for me, living in Mississippi, I don't have the ability to go to altitude anymore. When I was in California, I could go to a mountain on the weekend and be at 13,000 feet, and come back down and the next week and do it all over again. In Mississippi, I just have to simulate the best I can. It's been successful so far, is I have a truck tire, a big tractor tire, and I just pull it at the straps, and I just pull it, and I've got to a point, my goal before I left was to pull it 1.5 miles. So,
Oh, my.
yeah, so you just pull it till you're almost ready to puke, and then you pull it some more.
But the group that, like, you went with, I'm sure they want to say, tell us your resume, because we don't,
Oh, yeah,
people
absolutely.
that can't make it, so you don't just go climb Everest, I'm sure you've climbed other
So,
really high peaks,
Reggie
right?
said if you don't climb Mount Everest, why climb Mount Everest? You shouldn't. I'm not saying that. If you want to climb Mount Everest, this is what I will tell you. What your resume needs to include is, because a lot of people, when they get caught up in the 7 summits, which is the highest summit on all of the continents, what they'll do is they'll do Kilimanjaro in Africa, which is just a really long trek. It's just a long hike. It's not a lot of danger. There's altitude involved. And then they'll climb, like they'll go to South America, they'll climb another, but they've never put those crampons on. So a rule of thumb, if you're going to climb something like Mount Everest, is you have to have had at least 100 days wearing crampons. If you haven't had crampons, and I'm telling you, there are people on the mountain who pay the money, and they're putting crampons on for the first time. This is not a place where you need to be learning how to do that. So a lot of that stuff, you have to do something smaller, gain some experience to get to that point. But if you haven't had crampons for at least 100 days, you probably don't have any business beyond Everest. But that's not necessarily the case. Now they're trying to crack down. The Chinese side, you have to have a very substantial resume. You have to have climbed another 8,000 meter peak before they'll allow you to be on an expedition. Nepal, not so much. They're trying to crack down on it, but they'll take anybody. because it's a small country, involved just the climbing permits alone, they probably generate over $15 million for the country.
really?
So that's a big, big deal. Tourism's a huge industry in Nepal, so they don't want to limit anything if they can. So, so if you're gonna go, be prepared, but obviously have something. So my resume was, I had done a lot of peaks before.
Which
I
one?
explained.
Tell us
So,
what.
so I've done the 7 summits, and I've climbed more mountains than this, but Kilimanjaro, Aconcagua in South America, Antarctica, so Vinson, and then this one, of course, being the 4th. But, so those things, because Aconcagua got me up to almost 23,000 feet, so it's the altitude. And Antarctica, the big thing is you realize that you can survive in harsh conditions. And that's kind of what helps your resume. If I hadn't had the Antarctica thing, they may have questioned. But I've done a lot of extensive climbing in the Cascades and the Sierras in California and Washington, Oregon. So that kind of helped out too. But,
So what do you eat?
well, you have to bring your own snack food. So in the morning when you get higher on the mountain, when you're calorie deprived, and you really need to have calories, 2 packages of instant oatmeal is what they give you. Higher up on the mountain, you can't, if you want to eat something, you got to carry it. So 2 packets of oatmeal, and you got to supplement that, because you know if you had 2 packages of instant oatmeal down here, you'd be hungry by 10 o'clock. So then snack food during the day, but it's really hard to eat when you don't want to eat. And it's hard to actually eat because you got to dig through a bunch of stuff. You got to drink a lot of fluids. And carry 2 bottles of water. So that's basically roughly for 2.5, 3 liters of water for an entire 16-hour day. It's not a good plan. And then at night, it's freeze-dried food. And if you ate freeze-dried food, I don't know if anybody's in the freeze-dried food industry, but if you are, I don't mean any disrespect, but it's miserable. Down here, if you ate it, you'd have trouble digesting it. It's too much salt in it, and so it's really not healthy. It doesn't have any kind of nutritional return. So on the mountain, it's even worse. But that's, again, it's the most convenient thing to carry up there.
But at base camp,
I eat like kings. Yeah, I mean, they helicoptered in salmon once. So, and then in the kitchen, they had an oven in the kitchen. There were like 5, 7 Sherpas, I guess, that were cooking. And I mean, every night, we ate till we couldn't eat anymore. So, yeah, if you're base camp, you're good. Camp 2 is called advanced base camp. You get a little bit of that, not quite the same thing. But then the rest of the mountain, not so much.
Physically, what do you feel? I mean, you have headaches? Like, what do you feel like up there?
So I never have taken anything for altitude. I've been very fortunate. Diamox is one of the things they'll give you, and that helps your body start to acclimatize. So it reduces some of the symptoms that you'll get. So obviously lack of breath. Every time, even with oxygen, if you go up the yellow bands, for example, you climb up 15 feet and you stop and you're just, I mean, that's just with oxygen on. You can't get enough breath. You constantly feel like you're suffocating. You can't sleep at night. There is no such thing. There's no restful sleep. You might get an exhausted. I passed out for 30 minutes because my body just was done.
Wow.
And like I had a problem, I still have a problem with my left foot. I think I have a stress fracture from standing on that low-key face for so long. And that manifests itself. Fingertips were numb. And that's not because of Diamox does that. And I didn't take any, but you just get so cold, your circulation gets compromised. For a month afterwards, my fingertips and my toes and my feet were numb. Like, and I was thinking, I'm hoping this comes back. Everybody said that that's ultimately going to
Was that in May that you? Yeah.
This was last May.
When did you start climbing?
So really started seriously climbing when I was in Northern California. I lived in Sacramento for about 18 years, and that was in the 90s, early 90s on. Then, so I did a lot of rock climbing, and that kind of transitioned a little bit into mountaineering. So now it's weird. I climb more mountains than I rock climb, and there are rocks closer to me than there are these kind of mountains. But the beauty of it is the world is literally a plane flight away from anything. So, you know, I can still do this. I'm blessed to have a job where they allow me to do that.
You know, there's a lot of morbid interest on about the number of bodies that were left on Everest. Is that true? Are there a lot of bodies on Everest, and did you encounter any in your trek?
So the 2 most commonly asked questions, just since I've been here to Kentucky, and I got here last night, since I've been here in Kentucky, both of the 2 most frequently asked questions have been asked to me already. The first most frequently asked question is, did you see any dead bodies? And it's very unfortunate that at high altitude, especially 26,000 feet and above, it's physically impossible to take a body down. Especially if a body's been up there for a while, because it accumulates a lot of snow and ice. And 180-pound body will weigh
Yeah.
300 pounds. So it's impossible to be able to carry a body down from the mountain. So there are bodies still there. The northern route, where most of the expeditions started and now continue, you're going to see a lot more. In fact, there's a section of that northern ridge that they call the Rainbow Valley, because when you're standing on the climbing up and look over, you just see a bunch of different colors of down suits. So it's the Rainbow Valley.
Wow.
So unfortunately, yes, we actually had to step over.
Here's
Literally.
And so obviously, Greg, that's part of the discussion. You know that when you go in, that your family will know that if you were to die for any.
You really want to be respectful of the fact, I mean, I get the fact that it's just an earth suit that somebody left behind, but you still want to be
Yeah.
respectful of the earth suit that someone left behind. There is a family, a guy in 2019 who summited, and you can Google the guy's name and you can see it. So his family must know that their request was that his body be left where it was. He summited, came down, had a cardiac event on basically just below the Hillary step, and his body is there on the rock slabs. It's attached to a fixed line, and you have to step over.
Oh,
And if you Google, I mean, it's not like it's a mystery where he is. His family can look at video footage and know exactly where his body's located, and their request was that he stay there because he has the best view in the world. Well, his body's not doing anything. But, so it's very unfortunate. The other most frequently asked question is, would you do it again? And both of those questions have been asked now. There was a resident in last night. Another guy said, would you do it again? When I got down to base camp, you saw what I looked like. If you'd asked me then, I said, no, that's it. A lot of those climbers, like, that's the only 8,000 meter peak I'm ever gonna do, I'm done. Now, enough time has
it's only
transpired.
December.
I know, the sting of all that stuff fades pretty quickly.
How about our climber? Stephen Taylor, his brother. We've got the second part of our show going on upstairs in about 10 minutes, but Greg's going to be here to meet with you, answer your questions, to look at any of the stuff that we have. We've got cookies, we've got peanuts, those that are left. And there's a bathroom right over my shoulder. Thank you all very much for coming.
Wonderful. Pick up the backpack if you want to feel what it feels like to climb up the mountain.